Okay, so for this lecture, we're going over the cranial nerves. There's 12 cranial nerves, and you should know which one is a sensory or motor neuron. So we'll start with cranial nerve 1, which is the olfactory nerve, and that's a sensory neuron. And what that is, that sensory nerve is responsible for the sense of smell. The second cranial nerve is the optic nerve, and that's a sensory neuron, and that has to do with the ability to see. Okay, so cranial nerve 3 is the ocular motor neuron, and that is a motor neuron, and that has to do with the sense of extrinsic eye movement. And then you also have cranial nerve 4, which is also a motor neuron, and it's called trochlear neuron. And that also has to do with that also has to do with eye movement. And you have cranial nerve 5, which is the trigeminal nerve, and that is a mixed neuron, and that has to do with sensation of the face. And you have cranial nerve 6, which is the abducens neuron, and that is a mixed neuron, and that has to do with eye movement as well. And then you have cranial nerve 7, which is the facial neuron, and that is a mixed neuron, and that has to do with upper facial movement. Cranial nerve 8 is the vestibular cochlear neuron, and that is a sensory neuron, and that is for the sense of hearing. So you would do like a hearing test. And then you have cranial nerve 9, which is the glossopharyngeal nerve, and that is a mixed neuron, and that has to do with gag reflex. Cranial nerve 10 is the vagus nerve, and that also has to do with that has to do with swallowing and gag reflex and swallowing, and that is a mixed neuron. Cranial nerve 11 is the accessory nerve, and that has to do with shoulder shrugs, movement of the shoulder muscles, and that is a motor neuron. So cranial nerve 12 is the hypoglossal neuron, and that is also a motor neuron, and that has to do with movement of the tongue. So that concludes the 12 cranial nerves. You should memorize what type of neuron they are and the name of it as well.